Growing up, my hobbies are mostly around technologies. I'm always up for just like playing with cameras, TVs, and just always fascinated about how they work. So something kind of like that also carried out throughout my career. The ultimate purpose of technology is to let the users forget about technology so it just works. I was born in China in a small town called Yixing, which is near Shanghai. Growing up, I was with my grandparents a lot, and my grandfather, he's an engineer. I would always kind of just enjoy tagging along him, understanding how a radio would work and how like those old TVs would work. I always had that perspective of just trying to understand why things works underneath. When I was in college, commonly available technology around that time, it was Raspberry Pis. Basically, these are just portable, small Linux computers where you can just like very easily program, so you can actually connect this up into various sensors or buttons or cameras or basically any kind of like peripheral hardware you can put on this, and then you can immediately build something that's useful for your life. So like to me, I think that was kind of the inflection point where I quickly had a huge amount of interest into doing something that might be meaningful because it's actually something tangible. I graduated, I went to work, I was a firmware engineer, I worked on kind of like embedded devices. But around like 2018, 2019, that's when like cryptocurrency was a big thing. And I decided I want to understand behind, like underneath all the hype, how exactly does it work? So that's when I started to learn more about cryptography and understanding, for example, how Bitcoin works, how the Ethereum works, and also how some of the more advanced kind of like cryptocurrency systems work. And throughout the process, I learned about post-quantum cryptography because there is the problem of quantum computers might be developed, and that might be a potential threat to these systems. Quantum computers, instead of operating on classical bits, they operate on qubits, which give them a very high degree of freedom in terms of the amount of information it can hold in the system. So you can process a lot more information than a classical computer at a given time. That being said, it does not mean that we can use quantum computers to speed up any programs. In fact, we only know how to use the quantum computer to solve some very specific problems. So it just remains a possibility that the quantum computer can run a lot more efficiently than a classical one. But nowadays, with all the breakthroughs in quantum computing, it just becomes a threat that we can no longer dismiss. It was not until kind of like I joined Sandbox when I fully understood how a quantum computer works and also why it can be used to break some of the existing crypto systems. So we were doing a lot of kind of like R&D work, understanding these latest technologies from the AI plus quantum security space. We're in charge of this new product called AQtive Guard Protect. If the customer is still using kind of today's cryptography technologies, and if they want to go post-quantum, we can basically have an automated way to help them to migrate their infrastructure into this post-quantum state. My dream is always for technology to be more accessible to people and not just the superficial, like just a few cool demos or like using LLMs to help you write an email or help you kind of to like generate an image, but more in-depth integration into kind of like our everyday systems. And that's the problem we're trying to solve. My name is Stephen Yu. I work at SandboxAQ building AQtive Guard to help organizations navigate the complex challenges around AI and quantum computing so they can modernize their technology stack for the threats of tomorrow.